The following recording is one of the 38 workshops presented by and for members of the Adult Children of Alcoholics Fellowship at the 7th Annual ACA World Convention held virtually May 21st and 22nd, 2022. The AWC is hosted by the ACA World Service Organization and was made possible through the dedication and energy of ACA members giving service by sharing their experience, strength, and hope. Please visit the adultchildren.org website for more information about ACA, for worldwide ACA meeting listings, or to make a 7th Tradition contribution. We hope that you enjoy the following workshop from the 7th Annual ACA World Convention, and the theme was Beyond Mere Survival, Action Coming from Love.
And again, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. To the whole fellowship, good hello. Welcome to our 7th Annual ACA World Convention. This is the largest gathering, you've heard this a couple times already, I think. This is the largest gathering of adult children in the world, connecting our ACA members, our family of choice, to each other all around the planet to share experience, strength, and hope as we recover from the effects of dysfunctional childhoods. While the pandemic brought challenges to us all, it also brought us together as a truly global fellowship as we found belonging and connection with others, healing from the effects of family dysfunction. This convention is being hosted by the ACA World Services Organization, our WSO, and our theme this year is Beyond Mere Survival, Action Coming from Love. This year we have 38 sessions running nearly 40 hours around the clock and around the world. My name is Justine. I'm located in Pennsylvania in the United States, and this session is Finding Support in Recovery. To preserve everybody's anonymity, the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, please be sure to rename yourself to show only your first name and last initial. This session is being Zoomed worldwide, as well as being broadcast on a streaming channel and audio recorded. The audio will be available for listening and download on the adultchildren.org website. We therefore ask that you do not record any audio, video, or take any pictures of any part of the AWC. We also request that you not share the Zoom links on any social media, website, or email lists. Registration will be open throughout the event. Anybody can register. This is to protect the serenity of the event. We thank you for your cooperation in not sharing the links publicly. During the meeting, all participants will be muted. One of the tech hosts will take care of that. Chat will be closed to all, but you will be able to contact the host at all times. Please do not send chat messages to the presenters unless prompted to do so. When a volunteer is requested to read or ask or answer a question, we're going to have a Q&A at the end of this. Please use the Zoom raise hand feature at that time. You'll be asked to unmute when it is your turn to speak. The chat feature will only be open for participants before and after the main session, or if asked by the presenter to post questions or otherwise interact. I don't think we're going to do that. I don't think we're going to do chat questions later. Please remember that what you hear at this meeting should remain at the meeting. We do not talk about another person's story or experiences to other people. Please respect the privacy.
Justine, you're muted. You're on mute.
Hello?
Now you're not. Now you're not, but you were on mute for a minute there.
I don't know how, where did
you were saying,
where did I become unable to be heard?
I think it was after the raise hand. You talked about the raise hand feature.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Please remember, I didn't even touch the keyboard. Please remember that what you hear at this meeting should remain at the meeting. We do not talk about another person's story or experiences to other people. Please respect the privacy of all those who share today. While we're on video, please be mindful of others and turn off your camera if you are eating, smoking, not currently in view, or if the camera is showing us your ceiling. If you're moving around or in a public area with other people present. We meet to share the experience we had growing up in an environment where abuse, neglect, and trauma infected our childhoods and still affect us today. While our members may be from homes where addiction was present, it's not a requirement. The only requirement for membership in ACA is the desire to recover from the effects of growing up in an alcoholic or otherwise dysfunctional environment. By practicing the 12 steps and accepting that we can't recover alone, we identify with the problem or laundry list and learn to live in the solution of reparenting ourselves with gentleness, humor, love, and respect, one day at a time. Please join me in opening our meeting with the ACA Serenity Prayer in whatever language or form calls your heart. We'll take a deep breath. Higher power,
Higher power,
grant me the
grant me the
serenity
serenity
to
to
accept
accept
my change, courage to be kind
to one I can, wisdom to know that one is me.
Thank you so much. Is there a volunteer to read the solution this morning?
I'd be happy to read it. My name's Jenny. I'm an adult child from Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, thank you.
Sure. There's something on the screen that that is blocking some of the text.
It says, please move this window away from the shared application, but this is the shared application, so I don't know what to do with that.
Well, now it's faded, so it's fine.
It's going to come and go, unfortunately.
Okay, well, we'll work with it. The solution. The solution is to become your own loving parent. As ACA becomes a safe place for you, you will find freedom to express all the hurts and fears you have kept inside and to free yourself from the shame and blame that are carryovers from the past. You will become an adult who is imprisoned no longer by childhood reactions. You will recover the child within you, learning to accept and love yourself. The healing begins when we risk moving out of isolation. Feelings and buried memories will return. By gradually releasing the burden of unexpressed grief, we slowly move out of the past. We learn to reparent ourselves with gentleness, humor, love, and respect. This process allows us to see our biological parents as the instruments of our existence. Our actual parent is a higher power whom some of us choose to call God. Although we had alcoholic or dysfunctional parents, our higher power gave us the 12 steps of recovery. This is the action and work that heals us. We use the steps, we use the meetings, we use the telephone. We share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. We learn to restructure our sick thinking one day at a time. When we release our parents from responsibility for our actions today, we become free to make healthful decisions as actors, not reactors. We progress from hurting to healing to helping. We awaken to a sense of wholeness we never knew was possible. By attending these meetings on a regular basis, you will come to see parental alcoholism or family dysfunction for what it is, a disease that infected you as a child and continues to affect you as an adult. You will learn to keep the focus on yourself in the here and now. You will take responsibility for your own life and supply your own parenting. You will not do this alone. Look around you and you will see others who know how you feel. We will love and encourage you no matter what. We ask you to accept us just as we accept you. This is a spiritual program based on action coming from love. We are sure that as the love grows inside you, you will see beautiful changes in all your relationships, especially with your higher power, yourself, and your parents. Pass.
Thank you so much. And before we begin, if I can get things to cooperate, we have a note on sharing and crosstalk. An important part of our recovery is speaking our truth by sharing our story, experiences, and feelings. Sharing is one of the first steps we take when coming out of isolation. To create a safe space, please refrain from interrupting, making comments, referring to someone else's share, whether positively or negatively, mentioning someone by name, or offering advice. These behaviors are referred to as crosstalk. In ACA, we avoid crosstalk because as children, we were frequently interrupted, insulted, or told we were wrong when we tried to express our thoughts and feelings. In ACA, we speak for ourselves and our own unique perspectives without the need to qualify because it is true for us. We do this by sharing from our personal experience using I, me, and my, and avoid speaking for the group as a whole by not using we, you, and us when sharing. We keep the focus on ourselves and don't need to identify with or fix others. I am going to stop sharing and restart my camera. I apologize for any tech problems that we are having today. My laptop is not up to the AWC. I think it's shy. Anyway, so I need to, I'm going to share our presentation now, and we will begin. Okay. So this program, this presentation has to do with a booklet. We're at about 90 pages, I think, that was written recently by an ad hoc committee, subcommittee of the Literature Committee, called, the working title right now is Connections, A Guide to Giving and Receiving Support in ACA. And the state that this is in is that it will go to literature evaluation within a couple months. It's in the queue. It's kind of next in the queue, and we're excited to move it along. Liz, did you have a question?
I'm sorry, I do. Are you sharing something? Because all I see is black screen.
Okay, let's try that again.
If you want to send something, maybe somebody else could share it for you if you're having trouble with your computer.
Yeah, you could put the
Okay.
link in the chat and we could somebody could open it.
That would be great. Just give me one second.
Post. I can do it for you, Justine.
Thank you, Yasmina. There you are. And here I am. And I want to share a file. And the file is probably in OneDrive. Can someone pause the recording, please?
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. All right,
Thank
go
you.
Justine, go for it.
Thanks so much. So Connections is coming, and we are going to present it to you today along with some shares, and then at the end, we'll take some questions from people. Now, the writing group, the whole writing group could not be here today, but we have some incredible people here, and I will introduce them to you as we go along. I am excited to have them. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. This is an older version, that's why it's, okay, so the book opens with a meditation, and I'd like us to read that together. Can one of the tech hosts invite folks to, allow folks to unmute themselves? And after a deep breath, higher power.
May I remember that the ACA is needed
service
for
from
the
service
structure
from my
from my family of origin, my family of
patient and avoid
patient, may I be
and
patient, avoid
easy
reaching for the easy way out
with
difficult
situations. And those supporting me in my ACA
and those supporting me in my ACA program
programs
to ask for help and for help in
help
keeping
us
our
celebrate
recovery oriented.
So help us
celebrate things that we do right.
Recovery oriented. Also help us celebrate the things that we do right.
Thank you so much. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so again, I'm Justine, very grateful adult child, living and recovering these days in Pennsylvania in the United States. I am originally from Brooklyn. You will hear it. I cannot help it. I am going to read for you the introduction, part of the introduction. This guide was written in part to address questions that arose about the use of the terms fellow traveler and sponsor in Chapter 11 of Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, our Big Red Book, or BRB. We recognize that the BRB recommends the fellow traveler method of sponsorship, yet primarily addresses one-on-one support by a person with more experience of a person with less experience. This guide presents a broader version of support and clarifies that when the BRB speaks of the fellow traveler method of sponsorship, it's referring to the concept of using a non-directive and non-authoritarian form of communication, rather than prescribing that the only recommended form of support is where one person is an experienced sponsor and the other a less experienced sponsee. We recognize that the Big Red Book recommends that one get a sponsor. Over the years since the Big Red Book was written, ACA members have found varied ways of supporting each other in recovery without a formal sponsor. Furthermore, as we grow in our program, the nature of support relationships may change. We may not be of equal experience, strength, and hope with another, but we are all on equal footing, human beings deserving of respect. We use the word support, supporter, and supported person as umbrella terms for a variety of different relationships in ACA recovery, including sponsors, co-sponsors, fellow travelers, recovery partners, sharing partners, recovery coach, group work members, mentors, etc. We do not intend to substitute the terms supporter and supported person for the terms that you already use in your recovery, but recognize that whatever term you use falls under the larger category of support. That is just an excerpt from the introduction. Can we have the next slide, please? Okay, our first topic is sponsor relationships, and presenting sponsor relationships is the fabulous Sue V from Toronto. Sue, can you raise your hand so that I can, there you are, never mind, I found you.
You see me? Yeah. I am here.
There you go. Can we stop sharing while Sue is speaking? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Justine, and thank you, everyone. Hi, I'm Sue V. I am a grateful and a hopeful adult child, and I was asked to speak about the traditional sponsorship in the Connections Guide. It's called Working One-on-One with Someone with More Experience, Strength, or Hope, ESH. And I actually believe in diverse and multiple ways of ACA recovery, receiving and giving. But today I'm going to talk about this particular one. I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from the Connections book. Justine, I don't know if you have that on screen share. Don't worry if you don't. I have the document in front of me that you asked me to. So I'll start talking. And if you have it, it was the G, Working One-on-One with Someone with More ESH. So
I did give it to screen share. Do we prefer to see Sue or to see what Sue is reading?
Oh, good question.
Can I get maybe a show of hands for Sisu?
No.
No offense, you don't want to see my face.
You know what I'm going to do? I will share then what Sue is reading, and then when Sue finishes reading and starts sharing, we'll come back to see Sue. How's that?
Okay. So I'm just going to I've got my timer on. So in this, I'm going to read now. It says, working one-on-one with someone with more ESH. In this approach, one person with more ESH, experience, strength, and hope, works with someone less experienced, This is the method of support most frequently called sponsorship in ACA. Although Chapter 11 of the BRB recommends what it calls the fellow traveler method of sponsorship, meaning gentle and non-directive, most of the information in Chapter 11 addresses one-on-one sponsorship by someone with more ESH, of someone with less ESH. Both the experienced and the less experienced member can grow in trust and intimacy as the relationship develops. The experienced member shares their ESH and guides the newcomer in building their own foundation of recovery. These experienced members are not therapists or counselors, but they can offer needed support to another person revisiting abuse, trauma, and other overwhelming childhood experiences. Although some members use the terms fellow traveler or recovery partner for this relationship, the distinction is that the more experienced member works their program with their own recovery network and keeps their focus on the supported person's recovery. The WSO website defines a sponsor as follows. A sponsor is someone who attends ACA meetings regularly and who has worked the ACA 12 steps. The person has made progress in recovering from the effects of growing up in a dysfunctional home. The sponsor, unlike all other support relationships discussed in this guide, supports a sponsee by keeping the focus on the sponsee and sharing their own ESH only when helpful to the sponsee's recovery. Some ACAs resist when asked by someone to become a sponsor, feeling that the level of ESH and the responsibility of guiding another recovery program is overwhelming. Although many in ACA prefer to work with a recovery partner or co-sponsor in their recovery and choose not to seek a sponsor, we acknowledge that many newcomers want to find a sponsor and that there are fewer people willing to sponsor than needed. This section is particularly directed to the ACA who is asked to be a sponsor and questions if they are ready or able to sponsor. I'm going to pause there because I'm going to start sharing. Is that okay, Justine? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it gives you a little bit of an excerpt on that. So in order to share my experience, I have to go to the very beginning of when I came into ACA. I came in and desperate, suspicious, all of the things, and came into the meetings. And within a month, I was very fortunate. My group in Toronto, Canada, did and does regular step studies and laundry list studies now, and loving parent guide studies now. But anyway, they had the step studies, so I went into it, and there were 30 people in the room. And when it came to the section around getting a sponsor, there was a big push, you got to get a sponsor, you got to get a sponsor. And I'm stubborn and I'm suspicious. And I said, I don't think so. Three-quarters of the room were running out to get a sponsor. Me, I thought, no, I don't think so. I think I'll just sit here and wait it out. And so I did. And I worked through the 12-step study. And then something shifted me after. I wasn't thrilled about wanting to get a sponsor, but I checked to see why was I so resistant about it. And I thought something inside of me, higher power, spirit, said, I think you need to do this. I think you need to get out of yourself and stop intellectualizing and talk to somebody one-on-one. And there weren't many sponsors, I'll tell you. There was one woman who was a little older than me, only had 2 years in the program. And she was already starting to sponsor. And she and I chatted, and she said, I don't know if I could do this. And I said, I don't know if I could do this either, but I promise. She had said she'd been hurt. And I said, I promise you, I won't hurt you. I'm just curious about this program, and I have some real questions about it. And I'm struggling with some of the harshness in the steps, and I could use your support. So she said, okay, let's try it. And so we did. And she worked through the steps with me, and I asked my questions, and I got to start reflecting. The single most important thing that she told me, because she had more experience than me, was when it came to the harms list, I was really struggling. Because I said, what about me? My inner child and me are hurt, and I'm supposed to go out and do my no harms for everybody else. I said, I can't. And she said, Sue, you've forgotten something. I said, what's that? She said, the first person on your harms list is you. You have to look at the harms that have been done to you first before you can do anything else with anyone else. That resonated so much with me. And then later on in my program, I also added the harms that I had done to my inner child. And that was a whole new level of recovery. And I started to trust. I started to trust a little bit more. And after we had worked through the steps, and she said, I've given you what I have, Sue. I got nothing more. This is as much recovery as I've gotten in the 2 years. And she said, you're graduated. And she said, I think I need you to help me with something now. So now I get to practice what I'm learning and talk with her about what was going on with her life at that point. And so we really, I think, became co-sponsors, fellow travelers. And that's been my experience. If I need somebody with a little more experience, I remember I was struggling with healing, and I'm still healing from sexual trauma. And I knew someone in the program who had gone through that already. And I called her and I said, I'm struggling with this part. Do you think you could help me? I'll just finish in a couple of minutes. I think I'm almost out of time, but Justine, I'll just continue for 1 or 2 minutes. So that was my first experience with it. It was valuable to my recovery. And I would say after that, over the years, people have asked me the same thing, can you sponsor me? And I said, you know what, let's sit down and talk about where you are in your recovery and what you need. And let's just see if I have something that I can give away. The BRB talks about give it away if you want to have recovery. And so I did. And it wasn't an authoritarian way. It was gentle. It was listening. It was, do you want to hear? I remember when I hit that part in my ACA program, do you want to hear what happened with me and what I used? Not the content and the story, but what program tools did I use to try and help move me forward? And if it resonates, great. And if it doesn't, throw it away. And so I will let the others talk about the group sponsoring, and I'll later talk about service sponsoring. But I'm a big believer that there's no, at least for me, there's no one way to do this. I have to, in Canada, we would call it a mosaic. I have to create my own mosaic, my own ACA recovery, and take the best of all the different parts and then work with it. And that's what I've shared with anybody who's asked to speak with me, either as a sponsor or as a fellow traveler. And I'll let the others to talk about groups, because I'm a big believer and I got a lot of recovery from group sponsoring. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sue. Okay. Let us, Yasmina, can you share for just a moment the next slide, which is fellow travelers? Fantastic, thank you. This section is going to be presented by Louis B., who I'm sure is known to many of you. Louis is from the Gulfport, Florida area and has done a lot of work on A New Hope, the Beginner's Meeting Handbook, and which I have used and is wonderful, by the way. Louis, please take it away, sir.
Justine, thank you. Thanks for including me and inviting me to be part of this. I was, before I do a little bit of reading, I was involved in the group, this sort of sponsorship fellow traveler group for a bit. And I'm really grateful that I felt heard by that group, that my perspectives felt valued. And I feel like I've been able to contribute. Ultimately, the topic was just so triggering for me. I needed to step back at the time. But people have continued in ways that really align with a lot of my perspectives. So I'm really grateful for all the work that's gone into this. I was asked to speak about fellow travelers, the term, I guess it's called a model here too. There's a little piece I was asked to read. It's pretty short. I don't think we need to screen share it, if that's okay. It's just a little excerpt again from this connections work that's going out. So in this approach, speaking of fellow travelers, in this approach, 2 ACA members with similar experience, strength, and hope in programs support each other's continued recovery. This model works well for ACA members with significant experience, strength, and hope because they'll be familiar with program literature and principles. This can also work for 2 relative newcomers, although it seems to work best if at least one of the newcomers has some experience in working the steps in another 12-step recovery program, or if they have identified a more experienced ACA who's available to answer questions or lend support. In these relationships, the role of supporter and supported person shifts back and forth. We learn to listen intently when the other person is sharing, avoid giving advice unless it's directly requested, and practice the gentle and loving language used by a loving parent. So, and also I'm going to be timing, I think you said 7 minutes, right, Justine?
Total of 7, yes, thank you.
So I'll count that as a minute myself. So, yeah, what I just read doesn't exactly line up with my understanding, but I think it's pretty close in a lot of ways. And I think the group's really captured. It's trying to take some terms that I think there's a lot of ambiguity in our program and trying to make sense of that. And I think it does a really good job of that. So what I can say to introduce my perspective is that I've never formally been a sponsor of anyone else, and I've never sponsored anyone else. I've never sponsored anyone. I've never had a sponsor in my 7 to 8 years of ACA work. At the same time, I've had very close recovery relationships, and I've done very deep work with people, and there's no way I could have done this in isolation. So I've needed to connect with people. I've just needed to find different ways to do it. So looking at the Big Red Book, one piece that stood out to me was talking about the 1989 sponsorship committee, and really early on in the program, recognizing that there were some concerns around looking at the traditional sponsorship model in ACA. And a couple things they talked about were an over-reliance on others for direction and approval, and our tendency to try to manage someone else's life. And those stood out to me at the time because it really resonated. When I came into the program, part of my resistance around it was I didn't want to lose myself. I really wanted to try to work this program in real ways. And so I knew that I had an over-reliance on direction and approval. And if we look at the laundry list traits, the approval seeking stuff, the people pleasing stuff, all of that stuff, I just knew it was there. And I was just scared to death that I was just going to lose myself in that again if I get into a position where I perceive someone as an authority figure. That's really kind of what it boiled down to for me. And then the other piece too is this tendency to try to manage someone else's life. There's a lot of laundry list traits that align with that, and other laundry list traits that line up with that. And I know that I tend to be a rescuer. I know I tend to be over-responsible. I tend to want to come in and fix everything and take it over. And I just knew that if I came into a position where I was perceived as an authority or someone perceived me as an authority, I was probably going to fall into these laundry list traits. And I just knew I couldn't do that. I knew that I needed recovery too much to be able to lose myself in that. So, what I found was group work. That's what worked for me. And again, I really believe different things work for different people. And I'm appreciative that the connections document is going to focus on group work because there's nothing really in the Big Red Book or in our literature that talks about how to do that. But yeah, so for me, there was no loving parent guidebook at the time, but it was step work and then laundry list traits work. I became a part of small work groups, 4 to 6 people generally, and we would meet week after week. And it was sort of the group conscience of the work group that sort of became a holding space for me, and in a sense, sponsorship. And it's through those work groups that I found my closest recovery relationships. Not all of them, but most of them. It was in doing that deep work, the bonds that formed were so strong. And so, I have maybe 5 or 6 people I talk with or meet with weekly. These are what I refer to as my closest fellow travelers or my recovery partners. A lot of people from more traditional perspectives would call it co-sponsorship. But I guess one piece for me, I love the delineation in the book around this sort of idea of experience, strength, and hope. That really that's where a lot of the authority dynamics I think can come in. When someone has a lot of experience, strength, and hope, and working with someone with less, then that authority dynamic can arise. And that's, I think, what triggers a lot of us going into our laundry list traits. And I'm doing a workshop on this a little later today for if you want to check that out. But that's, I think, what we need to be aware of. And why do we take a look at this dynamic more closely in ACA where we might not in other 12-step programs? Because in ACA, we look at the laundry list traits, right? In other programs, as long as you're not sort of completely losing yourself in the addiction or compulsion, that's really sort of what the main focus is. That's if I'm not drinking again, for example, then it's okay. But in ACA, we look more largely at what our history brings to who we are today, and we call that recovery. We look at healing the laundry list traits as a part of recovery, and our laundry list traits can be expressed very easily when there's authority issue, power dynamics. So I think the caution in 1989 is sound, and it resonates with me. For other people, that sort of dynamic seems to work okay. And so again, I'm glad that ACA offered me enough freedom to find what works for me. Also in the Big Red Book, Justine mentioned earlier, this idea of equal footing comes up. And so it is complex. And I think what I would say, fellow travelers in ACA means different things to different people. It's a term. For some people, it's a very much an umbrella term, like supporter and supported person are being used in connections today. For some people, fellow traveler is basically anyone else in ACA. We are all fellow travelers in this program together, right? For some people, fellow travelers means very much co-sponsorship, right? Have this equal footing, and I find someone with similar experience, strength, and hope, and we're sort of mutually sort of doing this. For some, it's someone with more experience, strength, and hope working with someone who has less, and working through that dynamic. And from a more spiritual perspective, talking about equal footing, we're both very human. We're both prone to mistakes. We want to treat each other as fully humans, even though this authority dynamic may exist. For some, I think of fellow travelers sometimes as my closest or my trusted fellow travelers. I sort of differentiate it that way sometimes. Speaking to the people who I do my deepest recovery work are my closest or deepest fellow travelers. So I love that this document's going to flush a lot of that out. My sense is probably as the program continues, people will continue to use the fellow traveler term in different ways. And I think mostly that's just okay. And it can be that way. So that's my 7 minutes. That's what I have to share today. And thank you for listening. And I look forward to hearing what the others have to share too. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Louis. Okay, so let's see. Yasmina, the next slide, please. Okay, so this is me. I'm going to speak about groups and co-sponsors, mostly because that's all I've had in this program in 8.5 years. My name is Justine, and again, I am in Pennsylvania. I am from New York. I love this quote: study groups give us an opportunity to practice healthier ways of being and to release outdated coping behaviors. And the truth is that all relationships do that, but I have a special place in my heart for study groups. I will share the excerpt from the book that I will be reading. And then I'll talk for a little bit. I'm going to start my 7 minutes. Yasmina, if you could give me the screen. And I'll share this and hope that it's large enough for folks working in a small group, steps, traits, reparenting, etc. Some ACAs join private groups that aren't registered as open ACA meetings to work the program. These groups often meet to complete a cycle of the 12 steps or other ACA workbooks. These members provide each other with support as they mutually engage in program work. Some ACAs choose to work primarily in small groups. Others combine small group work with working one-on-one with another adult child. Frequently, members will meet someone in a small group who then becomes a fellow traveler, co-sponsor, or sponsor. The ACA program offers choice and encourages creativity in how members find support. The Big Red Book states that the traits we develop to cope with dysfunction in childhood cause us to recreate our family of origin in our adult relationships. This can occur anywhere, and study groups are no exception. Working with ACA literature can bring up buried memories and triggers. We might find ourselves or others playing out a familiar family role or responding from our wounded inner child or inner teenager. small groups strive to create safety for members. Even so, members can become triggered by one another and dysfunctional behaviors can arise. It is not uncommon for a member to leave a work group along the way. We might realize that a particular group isn't a good match, or that small group work isn't a good fit for us at that time. It's okay to leave groups and meetings that don't work for us and find ones that do. Finding a group that fits is a process and can take time. Study groups give us an opportunity to practice healthier ways of being and to release outdated coping behaviors. Whenever possible, it can be helpful to have an ACA network outside the group to support you for reparenting purposes, as well as to discuss issues and feelings that arise. It's important to keep each study group a safe place to practice these new ways of being. Okay, so again, I'm Justine. When I came into ACA, there were no sponsors. In the meeting that I was attending, and I was only attending one at the time, this was pre-Zoom, and my area didn't even have enough meetings where you could go to one a day. That's not true anymore, thankfully. There was one man who was dangerous, in my opinion, and there was a woman who terrified me. She has since become a good friend, but at the time I thought she was very stern, and there was no way I was going to work with her. So I got together with a group of 3 other women, and we went through the steps the first time. And honestly, we had no idea what we were doing, but it worked anyway. And one of the reasons that it worked for me personally is that I knew it wouldn't be the last time I did the steps. So it didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be complete. It didn't have to be the pinnacle of my recovery. It just had to be. I wanted to get moving, to find out what this was all about. And for me back then, that meant the steps. I wasn't even at that time ready to deal with the concept of an inner child, much less a healthy inner parent or loving parent. I had no idea what that looked like and didn't think that the concept could possibly apply to me. When I finished, by the time I finished the steps the first time with that group, and the 4 of us, only 2 finished. And I think if you have done a step group, you know that that's pretty much how it goes most of the time. I had started another meeting in a different part of New Jersey, and we formed a group there to go through the steps. And it was a co-ed group of 8 people. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I was the only one in the room who had done the steps in this program. But it didn't matter. I wasn't the leader of the group. I wasn't special in any way. I was just, as Bill used to say, another bozo on the bus. We had great discussions. We had tremendous intimacy. These people are still my family. And it didn't matter that I had a little bit more experience than anybody else, because everybody had something to share. Everybody had something amazing to share that I needed to hear. Even the very newest members. We still communicate today via a text group into which we have invited some others. And these are people that I will love my entire life. I have done the steps a couple times since that group. And the experience has been good. It's always good, but it's never been exactly that level of action coming from love as it was with that group. And I realized that not everybody gets that lucky with their first group. There can be tensions, there can be disagreements, there can be acting out behaviors. But for me, that's the ideal to strive for, is a group of people that you can turn to, so that when something happens, when you need support, you don't just have one person to turn to. You've got now 8 or 10 or 6 or 4. however many people are in your group, and over time, these people become trusted and loved and are there for you. And one of the people in that group is now my co-sponsor. And she is the person that I call first, always. And I love her dearly. So I hope that anytime anybody asks me, how do I find a sponsor? And I have heard, I've been to a workshop where someone has said out loud, you cannot work this program without a sponsor. I always want to let people know, and my 7 minutes is almost up, but I always want to let people know, find a group. The most important thing is to come out of isolation and not try to work this program alone. Find a group. If you can't find a group, start a group. I've never heard of anybody who wanted to start a step group and couldn't find anybody to do the work with them. Be brave. Listen in your meetings to the people who maybe sound hopeful, or maybe you can relate to, or maybe they do have a little bit more experience and you want that. Just reach out to them and ask them. And don't take a no personally. Everybody's at a different place. Just keep looking and you'll find your people. I think one of the joys in this program is when we finally find our people. That's all I've got for right now. Thank you. Yasmina, the next slide, because I'm lost. Gender and support. Thank you so much. This will be presented by Greg R., who you may know was the chair of the nominating committee.
Sorry, I think this was the next one, service support. I'm sorry, I lost track.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think you're right. I think we were going to go through all the forms before some of the issues. So Sue V will present this. Volunteering to do service as an opportunity to support each other around issues that arise in groups. Sue, all you.
Alrighty, thanks. Thank you, Justine. And I'm going to again read from the Connections book. There's just a few paragraphs. Service roles in service support. By taking on responsibilities in service as a greeter, meeting chair, meeting secretary, intergroup representative, or the like, we meet others in recovery and learn to practice responsibility, which increases our self-esteem. Attending business meetings provides a place to be heard and to practice group conscience with others. As we grow in recovery, we may volunteer service at the World Service Organization, WSO level. Many ACAs who perform service seek a supporter, a service supporter, someone more experienced in service, to ask questions and receive support. The next section is service work. Volunteering to do service is an opportunity to support each other around issues that arise in groups. The suggested commitment to service, my favorite by the way, BRB page 601, guides our groups, service structure, and recovery relationships so that we perform service and practice our recovery together. Others may benefit from our service, but we also deepen our own recovery. Last paragraph. There are 9 commitments that guide us in our service work. For example, commitment 6 asks us to accept the different forms and levels of service, allowing those around us to each function according to their own abilities. Commitment 7 asks us to be willing to forgive ourselves and others for not performing perfectly, which helps us to avoid perfectionism and all or nothing thinking. And so I love the commitments of service. I'll start there, and those 2 particularly. And any of the service committees and groups that I help support, I ask for group conscience about reading certain traditions and meditations and the commitments of service, because I find it helps me to be personally grounded. And I've been told by others it helps them as well. And so I will say to you, for me, when it comes to service support, I felt like I found the secret ingredient to my ACA recovery. I really did, because I was not wanting to overdo in the beginning, and I still don't want to overdo, but I'm finding challenging balancing these days with the board, but the board work. But I would say to you, the little bits I was doing in the meeting, helpful, going for coffee after when we could, or tea, having a conversation, breaking out of that isolation. If you can read, you can lead. As a trusted servant, I was told. And even when I was starting to recover and people wanted more sponsors and we didn't have enough and there wasn't enough of me, I started sponsoring groups in a way. I started to up meeting these studies and I got 100-fold back. Any service I've ever done that calls my heart, I get 100-fold back. It's always mutual. And if it isn't, it's not healthy and I'm off path. I'm off my path and it's an obligation. I've done intergroup service work and I've also done WSO service work in many ways. And you know, there's an expression before ACA. I lived in the country growing up and I came into the city and my neighbors used to say, you know, when are you getting the chickens in? Because I have a very country-like look around me. And I said, you can't take the country out of the girl. And when I'm doing service, you can't take the ACA recovery out of the girl, out of me. I have to work my service with my ACA recovery at the same time. Don't expect anyone else to do it. I do it. I get an emotional reaction and trigger, and I haven't had a million of them. And at first I would say to you, I thought, oh my God, I got to look at this. And I did. And I used the laundry list. I used the reparenting. I used the steps. And then I grew into, oh, thank God, I'm going to celebrate. I'm feeling there's some emotional reaction here. And I'm going to stay in the healthy pain, as the yellow workbook asks us to, and reflect on my feelings, check in to see how am I doing? How's my inner child doing? Where do I think I'm being reactive in my laundry list traits? And I do that outside of the service meetings because that's my stuff and that's my inner healing. But the external part is, oh, do I need to have healthy boundaries? Do I need to speak up? Maybe I feel I'm not being heard. How can I respectfully share my opinions on things? And I found that when I stayed focused on the I and focused on the we, tradition one, common welfare of the group comes first. It steers me right every single time. And I have lots and lots of healing with that. And I continue to do that. I think I'm out of time right now. I think I heard. And so I'm going to pass at that, but don't force yourself to do service. Do it, call in your heart, do a little bit at a time, grow into it. That's what I did. And sometimes you have to take a break and that's okay too. With that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sue. Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's our next section is gender and support, which will be presented by Greg R., who used to be chair of NOMCOM and has been our parliamentarian for the ABC this year, and many other wonderful things from Greg. And this section, there's a quote that says, a person of the same gender identity may relate more directly to what it's like to grow up with that identity, not only in a dysfunctional home, but in a dysfunctional culture. And so we will turn it over. I will make Greg a co-host and we will turn it over to Greg. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be able to speak. I'm going to go ahead and I'll share that section from the connections draft that I have. And I wanted to point out a couple of things in it. And if you can't see it properly, let me know. I generally have difficulty with making things show up. You know, I think the first thing that's really important is that first phrase, while there is no one rule about working one-on-one. You know, the thing that I focus on in here is, you know, there are things that I don't know. I don't know what it's like, and I'll highlight this, to grow up as a different gender. I don't know what it's like to grow up in different dysfunctional cultures. And the other thing is that I know that even with someone of my own gender identity, they may not be comfortable sharing some of their intimate details, things about sexual abuse, physical abuse, relationships, that sort of thing. And I have to, one of the things I've learned is to be accepting of that. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off now, stop the share. When I came into ACA in Austin, there was no ACA in Austin. It had gone away 20 years before. And I had moved here from Northern Virginia, and two friends of mine, when I told them that after a month and a half here in Texas, I was ready. I had moved here to be with my loving partner, Barbara. And after a month and a half, I was ready to leave. Same thing that I'd done in the past. So they said, start a meeting. And I did. Now that's both, positive, and it has some negative aspects to it. I started several meetings, and several other people started other meetings till we had more than one meeting a day here. Now, I like the term recovery partner. It implies something that goes beyond gender identity, sexual identity, just any sort of thing. What we found here was, since we just started up, we didn't have anybody that had any experience supporting others, being recovery partners. And I came from two other programs that I had worked for several years, where I was familiar with sponsorship, but it turns out that I was familiar with a different kind of sponsorship than a lot of people recognize in those programs. I came from very loving sponsorship, guiding sponsorship, people that ask questions instead of giving directions. And I know now that that's not what others have experienced. And so when I started here, people would come up to me as soon as I had worked through some of the steps. They came up and asked me to be their sponsor. And I have to say that because we didn't have a lot of fellow travelers that had worked any of the steps. I've sponsored gay men, lesbian women, lesbians, bisexuals, other straight people, both women and men. I was told at one point in time by someone, when I did get a sponsor, a co-sponsor myself, they said, well, you've got to stop sponsoring anybody but men. I said, well, who do I drop? There are too many, we don't have enough people here of all different gender identities to actually sponsor other people. So what's the key for me? The key is discernment. What are my motives? Why am I willing to sponsor this person or that person? A good example for me is, there was talk about service. I do quite a bit of service work at the local level and as well as at the WSO. And I know when I am no longer able to contribute to more recovery partners. And so there are people that have come up to me and said, would you work with me? And I've had to say no, not because of any other reason, except that I know that I can't honor that commitment. That's a bigger commitment to me than any of my other service work, is working with my recovery partners. So what are my motives? And I need to keep checking my motives when I'm sponsoring someone or working with someone or recovering with someone. And by the way, I have used the sponsorship model, but a sponsor to me is a loving guide that helps by questioning people, not by directing. And so things that I check for: am I romantically or sexually interested in this person? And that's addressed in the connections guide. But what's not addressed is, do I have a financial interest? Am I looking for somebody that's gonna help me out by driving me places or doing something for me? I've heard of people that ask people to paint their house and things like that. That's not, that's a financial interest. I need to check on that, make sure I'm not doing that. I had one sponsee one time that said, oh, I'll come by and power wash your driveway. And I said, how much do you charge? Oh, I'll do it for free. I said, no, thank you. That's the kind of thing I have to check in my motives. Am I looking for someone to be my loving parent? I got to tell you, I know that we're supposed to talk about I, me, and we and myself, but there are many people in our meetings that are looking for a loving parent outside of themselves. And I have to make sure that I'm not stepping into that role. I'm in particular, I'm 70 years old. Most of the people I work with are at least 20 years younger than I am. And it's really difficult sometimes when somebody comes to me and they're looking for some guidance and they're the age of my sons and daughter. You know, I have to really step back and say, whoa, am I approaching this as a parent, or am I approaching this as a recovery partner? Am I looking to dominate somebody? Am I looking to control somebody? I know that we have lots of horror stories from people in other fellowships who have done that. I don't think that's the norm, by the way. I think those are outstanding examples of things. But is there another dynamic that's at play here other than just simply being in recovery with someone? I have to look at that. And I also have to encourage my recovery partners to constantly do that checking with themselves. There are some other parts of this that aren't gender-based as much as just general experience that I have. One of the things that I've learned is that I learn from every encounter with my recovery partners. It doesn't matter if it's somebody who is working step one or is first introduced to non-dominant handwriting. I learned something from an encounter with them. And for a long time, I just said, yeah, I learned something from them. And now I'm very specific. When we get done with a conversation, I tell them, wow, this is what I learned from you today. Thank you very much. And it helps me stay in that realm of checking my motives. The other thing that's talked about in that connections guide in those two paragraphs that just flashed on the screen is I also have to allow anyone I'm working with to go to someone else for specific support that they don't feel comfortable with me. And it's not about me. It's not about me. If I have a woman that I'm supporting because she hasn't found another woman to support her, then if she, and men too, in fact, several of the men, I haven't had this experience with a woman, so I don't know why I use a woman as an example, but I have men that have said, I really don't feel comfortable sharing my fifth step on this particular thing with you. And I say, okay, is there somebody that you can go to? And they'll say, yeah. Or they'll ask me, is there someone that I know? And I'll give them that. So those intimate details sometimes can stop people, think that they have to share everything with whoever their recovery partner, recovery buddy is. And I don't feel that way. I think that we have to let that go. And then that leads into another point that with fellow travelers and study groups, one of the things we've observed here is that people do split off. And so what I've recommended to people that I work with is just raise your hand in a meeting, say, I'm going to work step 4. Is there someone who's willing to work step 4 with me? And that's it. Don't try to work through all the steps. It's good to, but you don't have to. You can work step 6 with somebody. One of the things that I find it's general, it's not gender-based, but I've had to stop going to some of the meetings here, and this goes back to this, what are my motives? I've had to stop going to some of the meetings I started because others look to me for direction in the meeting. They look to me as it was my meeting. And that's been a great lesson for me. And it's really been disappointing because I've had to stop going to, I think it was 5 meetings was my last count because of that. And so again, when it comes to gender considerations and others, I have to keep checking my motives. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And what's it really mean? That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Greg. So our next section, our final section before the Q&A, is solving problems in support. And Diane from Connecticut will speak on this section. If we become uncomfortable, feel unsafe, and want to change our commitments, we step back, seek discernment from our higher power or spiritual principles, and then seek a solution. Diane, all yours. Diane? Do we need to invite Diane to unmute?
Got it. You can hear me now? Great.
I can.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Justine, and thank everyone for their service and all those that are here today. I was invited to speak on this today because I recently encountered for me, it was a difficult situation with someone that I sponsor. So before I talk about that, I'm going to read a little bit of the excerpt on, it says here, when either party is not meeting their commitments. It opens by saying, as abandonment is a key laundry list trait, we recognize when we make a commitment to call someone on the phone or show up at a meeting or participate in a group study, that honoring our commitments help others in our network feel honored, respected, and heard. If we take on a service commitment, we honor the terms of the commitment or find a substitute if necessary. If we agree to meet one-on-one with a supporter, we respect the time and energy we both devote to these meetings, and we both show up when we say we will. If we become uncomfortable, feel unsafe, and want to change our commitments, we step back, seek discernment from our higher power or spiritual principles, and then seek a solution. By regularly checking in with each other, we become aware when the commitments made on the original plan are not yielding progress in program. As the ultimate goal of all recovery work is to reclaim our authentic selves, we can practice by being authentic, by talking about the program we have agreed to, what is working well, what is not, what we can decide to do or change. If we feel uncomfortable or unsafe with any person, we can ask for help. Sometimes, in an effort to achieve an intimate relationship, either member in a support relationship may fall into people-pleasing, agreeing with the other when they aren't clear what is being said, failing to be honest about what they don't understand or what they disagree with. We have to remember that we may be using people-pleasing as a strategy to avoid criticism. We are working our program to balance or release these traits. With loving support from our higher power or our spiritual principles, we recognize when we fall into people-pleasing and seek to be our authentic selves. So I said when I opened that I recently had a situation that I needed support with. I too have been in the program for quite some time, and I am older than most of the people that I sponsor or fellow travel with. And mostly I sponsor, and I think that's because I am older, and many of the people that have come into our rooms, it's their first 12-step experience, and so they're looking for a little more guidance, I think, at that point. But I also have fellow travelers that it's where I get my support from. I tend to, when I sponsor people, it's not reciprocal in the sense that I'm looking to them to talk about any of my issues. I certainly share my experience, strength, and hope, and I hope that I have the humility to be respectful. I'm pretty clear that I never would suggest, well, sometimes I make a suggestion, but I'm very careful about never saying what I think someone should do. I practice boundaries. I just try to be, as I heard the gentleman before me say, I just try to be a loving guide, and that has worked very well. The situation that was difficult, it was a woman that I met who asked me to be her sponsor. She told me her story, and it's so interesting because after I learned her story and some things about her, I realized that she'd had some pretty serious losses and a lot of trauma. And one of the first conversations I had with her was about the trauma and of course the loss associated with that trauma. And I wasn't sure that, it was the best thing for us to be walking through some of these issues together. But she assured me that she had a trauma therapist and would, be seeking help there, and that we just take it, we take it a step at a time. But as time went on, what I realized was, and this is what I've learned from one of the things I've learned from the experience was how I feel at the end of a conversation with someone, a sponsorship conversation or a fellow traveler conversation. If I feel exhausted and depleted, it indicates to me that something is off, even when, because I listen to people's traumas and difficulties and very sad stories, and I don't always feel that way after. So I needed to get some help because I was feeling like it wasn't working and I wasn't being effective. And I was anxious about it because I know in ACA, people, have dealt with a lot of abandonment, a lot of criticism. And the truth is, I really cared about this woman. I had a lot of, feelings about caring for her. And because she had been through so much, I wanted to be very sensitive to how we might go forward. I was feeling like I needed to end but I wasn't quite ready to give up. So I suggested that we put some structure around our time together when we talked. So we started working through the steps together. And I tried to encourage her when she was in the midst of an issue to look at the laundry list. I just tried to put some boundaries and structure around our time together. Ultimately, it didn't work. I was feeling more and more like she was very stuck in the stories of her childhood and the traumas and the abandonment. So I reached out to my fellow traveler. She's been my fellow traveler for 8 years. I went through the laundry list. I had to pay attention to the fact that I am a rescuer and a fixer, and that I am a people pleaser. And a lot of those things came into play. And because I've been in recovery for a long time, I've done a lot of my own work. And so after changing our format and doing the step work and putting those structures in place, I went into a discernment process. I prayed about it. I talked to my fellow traveler. I made a decision to end our relationship. And so I did that with the most extreme care. I was honest. I spoke in I statements what I was experiencing. Reiterated that I'm not in this capacity, I am not a professional. And that I felt that, and one of the things I left out was she wasn't really using her trauma therapist during this time. I forgot to say that. So I really didn't feel like I was serving her, and I did, and it was difficult. We were both very sad. But during that discernment process, I realized that I had been triggered. And that was one of the things that I read about. I grew up as a parentified child. I feel like I was my mother's rescuer and her confidant. And I can be easily triggered with that. And I did not want to be in this relationship in that way. So I have to say, as painful as it was, I think for both of us, I think it ended pretty well. And I continue to hold her close in my thoughts, and I do pray for her. And I have not talked to her. I didn't leave that door open because I just felt she needed to move on. So, and as did I. So thank you for letting me share all that. I'm happy to answer any questions about that if people have them. Thank you for letting me serve.
Diane, thank you so much. Okay, so this is it. This is our question and answer time. We need to leave a few minutes for closing, but we have almost exactly 30 minutes for questions. If I'm going to ask people to please use your digital Zoom hand if you have a question. And Brad, if you would monitor the raise people to when it's their turn to speak.
Justine, your audio cut out a little bit. I didn't hear everything you said.
I'm sorry. I want to ask you if you would monitor the raised hands and invite folks to mute when it's their turn to ask their question.
Yes.
Unmute. Thank you.
We have Janine T first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeannie T from Florida, and I literally had my little finger on the raise hand thing on my iPad because, oh my gosh, my mind is just so blown at how wonderful this document is and what a gigantic need it feeds. And I just was so impressed with the document and the wisdom from the people that worked on it. And the only question I really have is, how long is this document? And I heard a term early on. Was it called supporter and supportee? Thank you so much.
Jeannie, the document right now sits at about 90 pages, maybe 86 or so. And the terms are generally supporter and supported person, or really whatever you want to call them, whatever works for you.
Thanks. I love that stuff. Thank you so much. Oh, props to the team on this. Thank you.
Thank you.